The cold splash of vintage champagne hit Zoraide Vance's face before the sound of the glass shattering even registered. Ideally, the liquid should have been in a crystal flute, toasted to the merger that was about to save the Kensington family from absolute financial ruin. Instead, it was dripping off Zoraide's chin, staining the lapel of her crimson power suit a deep, violent shade of wet rust. The ballroom at the Gilded Oak Estate went deathly silent. 300 guests, the elite of Charleston society, froze. The string quartet stopped mid-measure. The only sound left was the slow, rhythmic drip of alcohol hitting the marble floor and the sharp, cruel laugh of Blair Kensington, the bride-to-be and daughter of the CEO. Blair stood there, her white lace gown pristine, an empty bottle of Dom Perignon dangling from her hand like a weapon. She wasn't sorry. Her face was twisted in a look of pure, unadulterated malice. "Oops," Blair sneered, her voice carrying to the back of the room. "I thought you were the help. You looked thirsty standing there in that cheap suit. I was just trying to serve you." Zoraide didn't flinch. She didn't wipe the champagne from her face. She stood like a statue carved from obsidian, her eyes locking onto Blair with a terrifying calmness. Zoraide had expected a cold reception. She knew the Kensingtons were desperate, arrogant, and notoriously bigoted. But she hadn't expected them to light the fuse this quickly. She looked at Preston Kensington, the patriarch and CEO, who was standing a few feet away. He wasn't rushing to apologize. He was smirking. He was enjoying the show. "Security!" Blair shouted, snapping her fingers at two large men by the door. "Get this trash out of here. She's crashing a private event. Probably here to steal the silverware." The humiliation was designed to be public. It was a spectator sport for them. Zoraide felt the eyes of the crowd, senators, investors, socialites, burning into her. They were waiting for her to cry. They were waiting for her to scream or run away in shame. They wanted the angry outburst that would validate every prejudice they held. But Zoraide Vance didn't operate on their frequency. She operated on leverage. But before we do, if you want to be entered in our video shoutout giveaway, simply subscribe now, then comment "I subbed" and you will be entered. This video's shoutout giveaway goes to Edward Patrick from Tennessee. Thanks for being part of the familia and supporting. Now, it's time to get back into the story. Zoraide slowly reached into the inner pocket of her soaked jacket. The security guards took a step forward, hands reaching for their belts. The crowd gasped, expecting a weapon. Instead, Zoraide pulled out a black titanium card. She didn't hand it to the guards. She flicked it onto the wet floor at Blair's feet. "Pick it up," Zoraide said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a timbre that vibrated in the chest cavities of everyone nearby. It was the voice of someone who owned the air in the room. Blair laughed, a brittle sound. "You want me to pick up your trash? You really are delusional." "Pick it up," Zoraide repeated. "Unless you want the bank to foreclose on this estate before you cut your wedding cake." Preston Kensington's smirk vanished. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. He looked at the card on the floor, then at the woman in the red suit. Recognition began to dawn on him, cold and horrifying. He had never met the CEO of Apex Stratos in person. All negotiations had been done through lawyers. He had invited Zora, the woman his daughter claimed was a former maid, to humiliate her as a pre-wedding joke. But looking at the steel in Zoraide's spine, the realization hit him like a freight train. "Wait," Preston choked out, holding up a hand to the security guards. "Don't touch her." "Daddy, what are you doing?" Blair shrieked. "Throw her out." Zoraide took a step forward, her heels crunching on the broken glass. "Yes, Preston. Tell your daughter who I am. Tell her why you've been begging my office for a meeting for 6 months. Tell her who holds the $4 billion lifeline that keeps your pathetic company from drowning." Do you think Preston will admit the truth to his daughter, or will he try to lie his way out of it? Let me know in the comments below. The silence in the ballroom transformed from shock to a suffocating tension. Preston Kensington looked like a man watching his life flash before his eyes. He scrambled to pick up the titanium card from the puddle of champagne. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it again. He read the name embossed in gold, Zoraide Vance, CEO, Apex Stratos. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse in a tuxedo. "Ms. Vance," Preston stammered, wiping the card on his expensive jacket. This is a misunderstanding. A terrible joke. My daughter, she didn't know." "She didn't know?" Zoraide interrupted, her gaze shifting to Blair. "She invited me. She sent the invitation to my personal email. The subject line read, 'Come see how the other half lives. You brought me here to mock me, Preston. You thought I was a nobody you could kick around to amuse your wealthy friends. You didn't realize that nobody was the only reason you aren't in federal prison for fraud.'" The crowd murmured. The word fraud hung in the air like smoke. Blair looked between her father and Zoraide, confusion warring with her entitlement. Daddy, what is she talking about? She's nobody. She's the daughter of the woman who used to scrub our floors. Shut up, Blair! Preston roared, his voice cracking. He turned back to Zoraide, sweating profusely. Ms. Vance, please. Let's go to the study. Let's discuss this privately. We can fix this. I'll pay for the suit. You'll pay for nothing, Zoraide said, wiping a drop of champagne from her cheek. Because you have nothing. Your liquidity is zero. Your assets are leveraged at 200%. You needed my $4 billion to cover the hole in your pension fund before the SEC audit next week. Zoraide turned to the crowd. She saw the senators and the bankers. She recognized them. Gentlemen, she addressed the room. I'd check your portfolios if I were you. Kensington Industries is technically insolvent as of now. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen once. It was a pre-written signal to her legal team. What did you do? Preston whispered, grabbing her arm. Zoraide looked at his hand on her sleeve until he let go, terrified. I just cancelled the deal, Preston. Apex Stratos is withdrawing its offer. And I'm initiating a hostile takeover of your debt. Blair finally understood. Her wedding, her inheritance, her status, it was all evaporating because she decided to throw a bottle of wine. She screamed, a primal sound of rage, and lunged at Zoraide. You ruined everything. You witch. Blair raised her hand to slap Zoraide, her long nails aiming for Zoraide's eyes. But the blow never landed. A hand, thick as a tree branch, caught Blair's wrist in midair. A man stepped out from the shadows behind Zoraide. He was massive, wearing a suit that struggled to contain his shoulders. Kalen. Zoraide's head of security and oldest friend. He didn't look angry. He looked bored. He twisted Blair's wrist gently but firmly, forcing her to her knees in her expensive white dress. I wouldn't do that, Kalen rumbled. What will the Kensingtons do now that their financial ruin is public? Blair knelt on the marble, gasping in pain, her pristine dress soaking up the champagne puddle she had created. Kalen released her wrist, and she scrambled back, cradling her arm, looking at her father for protection. But Preston was paralyzed. The phone in his pocket began to buzz. Then the phone of the CFO standing near the bar. Then the phones of half the board members in the room. The news was out. The stock was plummeting. You can't do this, Preston pleaded, ignoring his daughter on the floor. Thousands of people work for me. You're destroying their livelihoods just to prove a point? Don't pretend you care about your employees, Preston, Zoraide said, her voice dripping with ice. I reviewed your books. You haven't paid into the employee healthcare fund in 8 months. But you bought a new yacht last week. I'm not destroying the company. I'm stripping it for parts to pay the people you robbed. Zoraide turned to leave, her work done. But the doors to the ballroom slammed shut. For security guards, Kensington's private muscle blocked the exit. Preston's face had shifted from fear to a desperate, dangerous resolve. He was cornered, and a cornered rat bites. You're not leaving, Preston said, his voice trembling with adrenaline. Not until you sign a reinstatement of the deal. You think you can walk in here, humiliate my family, and walk out with my company? I don't think so. The guests began to panic. This was no longer a corporate dispute, it was a hostage situation. Kalen stepped in front of Zoraide, cracking his knuckles. He scanned the room, counting threats. 4 at the door. 2 by the stage. Preston was unhinged. Are you threatening me, Preston? Zoraide asked, unbothered by the muscle blocking her path. Kidnapping? Extortion? You really want to add felonies to your resume? It's a private party, Preston sneered, loosening his tie. No cameras. No press. Just us. You sign the papers, Zoraide. Or you don't leave this estate. Blair stood up, wiping her dress. A cruel smile returned to her face. She saw the guards and felt the power shift back to her. You heard him. Sit down. And maybe if you beg, I won't have the boys rough you up too bad. Zoraide sighed. She looked at Kalen. I tried to be civil. Kalen nodded. You did. Can I work now? Clear the path, Zoraide ordered. Kalen moved with a speed that defied his size. The first guard reached for a taser, but Kalen was already there. A swift chop to the throat dropped the man instantly. The second guard lunged, but Kalen used the man's own momentum to throw him into the dessert table. The sound of crashing china and breaking wood echoed through the hall. The crowd screamed and scrambled for the walls. Preston shouted orders, but his guards were hesitating. They were paid to toss out drunks, not fight a special forces veteran. Call the police, someone shouted. No police. Preston yelled. Nobody calls the cops. Zoraide walked calmly through the chaos Kalen was creating. She stepped over a groaning guard. She stopped in front of Preston. He backed away, hitting the edge of the stage. You hold people hostage with money, Zoraide said, leaning in close. You think power is bullying people who can't fight back. You forgot one thing, Preston. I fought my way up from the bottom. You just inherited a chair. She reached out and plucked the boutonniere from his lapel, crushing the white rose in her hand. And now, I'm taking the chair back. Do you think Preston has a backup plan, or is he truly finished? The brawl was short, brutal, and decisive. Kaelin had cleared the doors. Zoraide walked out into the cool night air of the estate gardens, leaving the ruin of the Kensington dynasty behind her. But the night wasn't over. As she walked toward her waiting SUV, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Ms. Vance, a distorted voice spoke. You made a mess in there. Who is this? Zoraide demanded, signaling Kaelin to check the perimeter. A friend. Or an enemy. Depends on your next move. You think taking down Kensington ends this? He's just a frontman. The money you just cut off, it belongs to people much more dangerous than a country club CEO. I don't deal with threats, Zoraide said. If you have something to say, show your face. Check your car, the voice said. And then the line went dead. Kaelin was already at the SUV. He held up a hand, stopping Zoraide. He pulled a small device from under the wheel well. A tracker. He crushed it under his boot. We're compromised, Kaelin said. We can't take the car. If they planted a tracker, they could have planted a bomb. Zoraide looked back at the mansion. Police sirens were wailing in the distance now. Someone had finally called 911. Preston would be busy with the law, but whoever was on the phone was a different kind of threat. We need to move, Zoraide said. The safe house? Too far, Kaelin said. We need to go to ground. Somewhere they won't look. Somewhere you haven't been in 20 years. Zoraide knew where he meant. The old neighborhood. The place she had sworn never to return to until she owned the block. It was risky. It was exposed. But it was the only place Preston's shadow partners wouldn't expect a billionaire to hide. They ran toward the service entrance, slipping through the hedges. They flagged down a beat-up taxi on the main road. The driver looked at Zoraide's champagne-soaked suit and Kaelin's bruised knuckles but didn't ask questions when Zoraide handed him a $100 bill. The south side, Zoraide told the driver. And keep the meter off. As the taxi sped away, Zoraide looked out the window. She saw a black sedan pull out from the estate gates, ignoring the police cars entering. It turned slowly, following the direction of the taxi. We have a tail, Zoraide said calmly. Kaelin looked in the rearview mirror. I see them. Professional drivers. They're hanging back in the blind spot. Can you lose them? In this traffic? No, Kaelin said. But I can lead them into a trap. Zoraide looked at him. She trusted Kaelin with her life, but she was tired of running. She wanted to fight. Do it. Who is tracking Zoraide, and what do they want with her $4 billion? The taxi wove through the city streets, moving away from the manicured lawns of the rich and into the grittier, neon-lit avenues of the industrial district. Kaelin directed the driver with precision, taking sudden turns down narrow alleys and one-way streets. The black sedan mirrored every move, relentless and silent. Pull over here, Kaelin ordered as they reached a dimly lit underpass near the old train yards. Here? Ain't nothin' here but rats, the driver protested. Just stop, Zoraide commanded. The taxi screeched to a halt. Zoraide and Kaelin bailed out before the wheels stopped rolling. The taxi sped off, eager to be gone. They sprinted into the darkness of the train yard, dodging between rusted shipping containers. The black sedan stopped at the entrance. 4 men stepped out. They weren't security guards. They wore tactical gear, moving with military precision. They carried suppressed weapons. This was a hit squad. They aren't here to talk, Kaelin whispered, pulling his own weapon from a hidden holster at the small of his back. They're here to liquidate. Zoraide didn't carry a gun. Her weapon was information. The warehouse, she pointed to a dilapidated brick building 50 yards away. My grandfather used to work there. It has a basement tunnel that leads to the subway. Go, Kaelin said. I'll hold them. No, Zoraide said. We stick together. I'm not leaving you. Zoraide, this isn't a board meeting. Kaelin snapped. Go. Before she could argue, a bullet sparked off the metal container inches from her head. The sound was a sharp crack. They were taking fire. Kaelin returned fire, forcing the hit squad to cover. Zoraide ran. She hated running. It felt like defeat. She reached the heavy iron door of the warehouse. It was rusted shut. She pulled, her nails digging into the metal, but it wouldn't budge. The footsteps of the killers were getting closer. Kaelin, she screamed. Kaelin was there in a second. He slammed his shoulder into the door. It groaned and gave way. They tumbled inside into the pitch-black darkness. The smell of oil and rot filled the air. The tunnel, Zoraide gasped, pointing to a trapdoor in the floor covered by a pallet. They moved the pallet and opened the hatch. But as they descended, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness above. "We have visual," a voice radioed from above. "Target is in the hole. Flush them out." A canister dropped through the hatch. It hissed. Smoke. Tear gas. Zoraide coughed, her eyes burning instantly. "They're smoking us out." "Keep moving," Kaylin grabbed her arm, dragging her through the narrow tunnel. "Don't stop breathing." They emerged into the subway maintenance tunnels, gasping for air. The rumble of a train overhead shook dust onto them. They were alive, but they were trapped underground, hunted by professionals, with no phone signal and no backup. "Who are these people?" Zoraide rasped, wiping her eyes. "The people Kensington owed money to," Kaylin said grimly. "The cartel. You cancelled the deal that was going to launder their money. Now they want a refund. In blood." How will Zoraide escape the subway tunnels with a cartel hit squad on her heels? They walked for an hour through the damp darkness of the tunnels, guided only by the emergency lights. Zoraide's expensive heels were ruined, her feet bleeding, but she kept pace with Kaylin. They finally found a service ladder leading up to a grate. Kaylin pushed it open. They emerged into an alley behind a 24-hour diner. The neon sign buzzed overhead, "Sal's All Night Eats." It was the spot in the image Zoraide remembered from her childhood. A place of safety. They stumbled inside. The diner was mostly empty, save for a few truckers and a tired waitress. The smell of grease and coffee was overwhelming. They collapsed into a booth in the back. Zoraide looked at her reflection in the napkin dispenser. Her hair was wild, her face streaked with soot and champagne. She looked like a survivor. "Coffee," Kaylin told the waitress. "Black. And a first aid kit if you have it." The waitress nodded, eyeing them suspiciously but pouring the coffee. Zoraide took a sip. Her hands were finally steadying. "We need to go on the offense. We can't keep running." "We have no weapons, Zoraide," Kaylin whispered. "And they have a small army." "I have the ultimate weapon," Zoraide said. She reached into her bra and pulled out a small, waterproof flash drive. "I downloaded Kensington's entire private ledger before I left the office today. I knew he was dirty. I didn't know he was cartel dirty. But this drive? It has everything. Names, accounts, offshore routes." Kaylin's eyes widened. "That's why they're trying to kill you. It's not just the money. It's the evidence." "Exactly," Zoraide said. "If this gets out, the entire operation crumbles. We need to upload it. But we need a secure connection. My phone is gone." Kaylin looked at the diner's old television in the corner. It was playing the news. Asterisk breaking, hostage situation at Kensington Estate. Police standoff ongoing. Whereabouts of Zoraide Vance unknown asterisk. "They're painting us as fugitives," Kaylin said. "If we walk into a police station, the dirty cops on the cartel payroll will hand us over." "We need a broadcast," Zoraide said. "We need to go live. Everywhere. Bypass the police. Bypass the media filters." Suddenly, the front door of the diner chimed. A man walked in. He wore a long trench coat. He didn't look like a trucker. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning every booth. He locked eyes with Zoraide. He smiled. It was a cold, reptilian smile. He pulled a phone from his pocket and spoke one word. "Found." Kaylin flipped the table. "Get down." The front window of the diner shattered as a van rammed through the glass, sending shards flying everywhere. Who is the man in the trench coat, and how did he find them so fast? The van screeched to a halt in the middle of the diner dining room. Men poured out, weapons drawn. The patrons screamed and dove under tables. Kaylin shoved Zoraide toward the kitchen door. "Go! Out the back!" Kaylin roared, picking up a heavy metal stool and hurling it at the lead gunman. The stool connected, buying them a split second. Zoraide scrambled into the kitchen. The cooks were frozen in shock. "Back door." "Where is it?" she yelled. "Through the freezer," a cook pointed. Zoraide ran through the walk-in freezer, the cold biting through her damp clothes. She kicked open the heavy rear door and spilled out into the loading dock. Kaylin was right behind her, limping slightly. He had taken a graze to the leg. "They're flanking us," Kaylin shouted. A black SUV skidded around the corner, blocking the alley exit. Blair Kensington stepped out of the passenger seat. She was holding a pistol. She looked unhinged, her wedding dress torn and muddy. "You took everything from me," Blair screamed, raising the gun. "My wedding. My life." "Blair, put the gun down," Zoraide said, holding up her hands. "These people you're with? They will kill you once they have what they want." "Shut up." Blair fired. The bullet sparked off the dumpster next to Zoraide. Blair's hand was shaking violently. She wasn't a killer. She was a spoiled child playing a deadly game. "Blair, look at them. Zoraide pointed to the tactical team closing in behind her. Do they look like your friends? One of the hitmen stepped up behind Blair and shoved her aside. Enough talking. Kill them. Blair looked shocked as she hit the pavement. She realized too late that she was just a loose end. Kalen saw an opening. A delivery truck was idling at the dock. He grabbed Zoraide and threw her into the cab. He jumped into the driver's seat and slammed it into gear. The truck roared forward, smashing into the black SUV. Metal crunched. Glass flew. The impact spun the SUV out of the way. Kalen floored it, the heavy truck barreling down the alley. Bullets pinged off the back doors. They were moving, but they weren't safe. Head for the tower, Zoraide said, panting. Apex Tower? Kalen asked. It'll be surrounded. Not the office, Zoraide said. The broadcast antenna on the roof. It has a direct satellite uplink. Independent power. If I plug this drive in there, it uploads to every news agency on the planet simultaneously. We have to get to the roof of a 40-story building with an army chasing us, Kalen said, swerving to avoid a dumpster. Sounds like fun. Will they make it to the tower before the cartel intercepts them? The delivery truck smoked and rattled as Kalen drifted it around the corner onto the main avenue leading to Apex Tower. Behind them, 3 black SUVs were in pursuit, weaving through traffic, indifferent to the civilians they ran off the road. They're gaining. Zoraide yelled, watching the side mirror. I know. Kalen gritted his teeth. Hold on. He slammed the brakes. The lead SUV, not expecting the move, smashed into the back of the truck. The impact jolted Zoraide's neck, but the heavy truck frame held. The SUV's radiator exploded, and it spun out, blocking the one behind it. Nice move, Zoraide said. 1 down, 2 to go, Kalen said. They reached the plaza of Apex Tower. Police cars were everywhere, lights flashing. Preston Kensington had clearly called in a favor with his corrupt contacts. They were waiting for Zoraide. We can't go in the front, Zoraide said. Parking garage, Kalen said. He jumped the curb, smashing through the ticket gate arm. The truck roared down the ramp into the underground garage. He parked the truck sideways to block the ramp. We go up the freight elevator. They ran to the service bay. Kalen hacked the keypad, overriding the lockdown. The doors opened. They stepped in just as the remaining SUV screeched into the garage, slamming into the truck barricade. The elevator began to rise. Zoraide checked the flash drive. It was still safe. Zoraide, Kalen said, checking his ammo. I have 2 magazines left. If they breach the roof, we upload the data, Zoraide said. Whatever happens to us after that, it doesn't matter. The truth survives. The elevator dinged. Roof level. The doors opened to a howling wind. They were 800 feet in the air. The massive satellite dish loomed ahead. But standing between them and the control box was a man. It wasn't a hitman. It was Preston Kensington. He was holding a gun, looking disheveled and wild-eyed. I knew you'd come here, Preston shouted over the wind. You always were predictable, Zoraide. Always trying to save the world. It's over, Preston, Zoraide shouted back. The cartel is cleaning house. They tried to kill Blair. You're next. Preston flinched. Liar. They're my partners. They're using you. Zoraide stepped forward. Put the gun down. Let me upload the drive. We can still walk away. No. Preston aimed the gun at her chest. Give me the drive. It's my only leverage. Suddenly, the roof access door behind Preston burst open. The lead hitman from the diner emerged. He didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. Preston gasped, a red blossom appearing on his chest. He looked at Zoraide, betrayed and confused, before falling backward off the edge of the roof. He plummeted into the city lights below, taking his greed with him. Zoraide stared in horror. The hitman turned his rifle toward her. Drive. Now, the hitman commanded. Can Kalen take down the hitman before he shoots Zoraide? The wind whipped Zoraide's hair across her face. Preston was gone. The hitman stood 10 feet away, rifle leveled at her heart. Kalen was to her right, his gun drawn but his angle bad. If he fired, the hitman would fire reflexively. Zoraide would die. Give it to me, the hitman said, holding out a gloved hand. Zoraide held up the flash drive. You want this? It's your death warrant too. Once this is gone, the cartel cleans up the cleaners. I'll take my chances, the man said. Zoraide looked at Kalen. She gave a barely perceptible nod. She tossed the drive high into the air, toward the edge of the roof. The hitman's eyes flinched upward, tracking the silver object. That split second was all Kalen needed. Asterisk bang. Bang asterisk. Kalen fired twice. 1 shot to the shoulder, 1 to the leg. The hitman collapsed, dropping the rifle. Zoraide dove for the drive, catching it before it skittered off the edge. She scrambled to the control box and jammed it into the port. Upload initiated. The screen bar began to fill. 10%. 20%. The hitman groaned, reaching for a backup pistol. Kalen kicked it away and stood over him. Stay down. More men were bursting onto the roof. Kalen took cover behind a generator unit, firing suppressive shots. How long, Zoraide? 30 seconds, she yelled, watching the bar crawl. 60%. Bullets sparked off the control box. They were pinning them down. They didn't care about the drive anymore, they just wanted them dead. 90%. Kalen. Zoraide screamed as a bullet grazed her arm. Almost there. 100%. Upload complete. Suddenly, the massive digital billboards on the surrounding skyscrapers changed. The news feeds hijacked. The files were broadcasting. Names, photos, bank accounts of every cartel member and corrupt official, including the police chief, flashed across the skyline of the city. Sirens. Real sirens. Hundreds of them. The FBI. The state police. The honest cops who had been waiting for evidence. The hitmen on the roof looked at the screens. They knew it was over. They threw down their weapons and raised their hands. There was nowhere to run. The sky was lit up with the truth. Zoraide slumped against the control box, clutching her bleeding arm. Kalen walked over and sat down next to her, exhausted. We did it, Kalen said, looking at the city lights. We did, Zoraide whispered. Now the real cleanup begins. What will happen to Blair now that her father is dead and the money is gone? 6 months later. The Gilded Oak estate was unrecognizable. The gates were open. The sign out front no longer said, private property. It read, the Vance Center for Youth and Innovation. Zoraide stood on the balcony where Blair had once stood. She wore a simple white suit, clean and sharp. She watched children playing on the lawn, kids from the south side, kids who had never seen grass this green. Kalen leaned against the railing next to her. He wore a suit now, not a uniform. He was the official head of security for Apex Stratos. Hard to believe it used to be a fortress, Kalen said. It was a prison, Zoraide corrected. Built on debt and lies. Now it serves a purpose. You heard about Blair? Kalen asked. Zoraide nodded. She's working at the diner. Sal says she's terrible at waiting tables, but she's learning humility. I paid for her lawyer. She got probation for her cooperation. You're too kind, Kalen grunted. She tried to shoot you. She was a symptom, Kalen. Not the disease. Breaking the cycle means giving people a chance to change, even when they don't deserve it. Zoraide looked out at the city. Her company had taken a hit, but the public support after the leaks had rebuilt her stock higher than ever. She was untouchable now. But she wasn't arrogant. She remembered the taste of champagne on her face. She remembered the feeling of being called nothing. What's next, boss? Kalen asked. Zoraide smiled. There are a lot of other Kensingtons out there, Kalen. A lot of locked doors that need kicking in. I think we should go find them. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk text, you won the battle, Zoraide. But the war isn't over. We are watching asterisk. Zoraide showed the phone to Kalen. He frowned. Threat? No, Zoraide said, typing a reply. Invitation. She hit send, bring it on. Zoraide Vance turned away from the view and walked back inside, ready for the next fight. She wasn't just a CEO anymore. She was a revolution in a red suit. Do you think Zoraide should have forgiven Blair, or should she have let her rot in jail? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice.